Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz Interview Series with Ukraine-based jazz saxophonist and composer Carlo Muscat. From his current home base of Kyiv, Ukraine, Carlo opened up about his latest 2023 release called Hymns, done with pianist Tony Tixier, featuring interpretations of some of the most renowned French songs. The interplay between these two musicians and their unique fusion of jazz and French creates an intimate soundscape that defines both the timeless melodies of the tunes and the varied influences of both of the respective artists. Carlo began his music education at the age of 8. A few years later, he picked up the saxophone and started to discover a love for jazz. In 2013, he moved to Paris, and over the years, he has performed a number of concerts around Europe. He describes his musical journey as a process that is ceaseless and expressive. Along with being a performer, composer, and private tutor, he is also the co-owner and director of the live music venue Storeroom. It's a great story. Enjoy. So it's great to speak with you. Thank you very much for taking a minute out.
You're welcome.
I actually had the pleasure of speaking with Tony right during the pandemic.
Okay.
He had done some work with some Kansas City cats. He had a Kansas City connection.
With Herman?
Yeah, with Herman and
okay.
And Herman had a couple, because Herman's moved on to Paris, and then there was a couple other guys. But yeah, he knew the whole Kansas City scene. We spoke to him from Paris in 2020.
Yeah, because he was also connected. He used to play with Logan.
Yes.
And Logan is in Kansas City now, as far as I know.
Yes, absolutely.
Logan Richardson. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So do you have that connection to Kansas City?
No, not really. I just know Herman because I'm connected to the Paris scene. I mean, I started my career in Paris. I moved there. So I grew up in Malta. I studied architecture. I graduated as an architect. I worked for a couple of years as an architect, but I kind of didn't want to work in an office. I was very much in love with architecture, but being an architect is very different. And then I decided, I'll try and do music. Wasn't sure exactly how it was going to happen. And I had a few Maltese friends, the director of the jazz festival, who is Sandro Zarafa, guitarist. He's one of the most established musicians in Paris. And I knew obviously the scene is great musicians, and I thought if I moved there, it would be a good stepping stone for me to start my career.
So what led you to Kyiv? What led you to Ukraine now?
So my partner lives here, and she didn't want to leave.
Excellent.
So we decided to stay. I was in Malta just for a few months because I was sorting out my visa and everything. And that's it. Now I'm back. I'm back here. I've been here since January, full time.
So I got to ask, the world right now is looking at everything going on, and I'm sure you understand this. If you don't, I can let you know. Mm-hmm. The world is 100% behind Ukraine and what's going on, and I'm curious, as someone that's living there, how are you doing? What's going on? What's kind of your perspective? I mean, I don't want to deviate from the music, but I think it's a part of the context. Yeah.
Of course. No, I think it's very important. Yeah, I mean, it all kind of comes together in the end. Look, Kyiv was not really affected. The good thing is that, I was scared just kind of the first 2 days when everything started, because we had no idea what was going to happen. And we stayed here. We decided not to move out immediately because the locals were telling us, look, be careful where you go, because the streets can be dangerous. You can get stuck in the street. The streets are blocked. Too many cars moving out of the city. It's a massive city. And in fact, that's what happened. There were people, expats trying to cross the border, and they were spending 72 hours in the queue, in the car. So hundreds of kilometers of queues. And we stayed put for 3-4 days. And then I was in touch with embassies, consulates, Maltese embassies, and they told us, okay, this bridge is open, you're located here, just take the bridge now this morning and go. and we moved west, and as it was quiet. But obviously we're not in the midst of everything that's going on, which is toward the east.
And I guess that's the one thing about the world climate right now, coming out of a pandemic, and we're obviously seeing shades of war that are happening, and everybody's, there's a level of uncertainty that's still going on, even though we're entering a post-pandemic time. Music has to be a great comfort for you as a creator, and I know it is for us as listeners, and to have new material out too.
Yes, I mean, I'm lucky that I managed to do quite a bit even during the pandemic, but still it was very much of a blow. I mean, it was kind of 2 years, let's say, until COVID started to be okay. And then, I moved here 1 month before the war started, and now it's been 1 year of war. So it's 3 years, everything together. But I managed to do a release in 2020 with musicians in Kyiv, in Kyiv. So we recorded here, and we're going to present that project for the first time live in Malta at the Malta Jazz Festival this summer. So that's pretty exciting. And also I managed to record another album in 2021 in Paris with some friends of mine there, some musicians from there, and now this album. So even though with everything that's happening, I always try to, as you said, use music to keep me focused, because if I don't have that, music has always been kind of what saved me in so many dark periods.
Well, and I think that's the thing that's beautiful about music. I remember even back in the late 40s, Dizzy Gillespie and Louis Armstrong would go on UN missions to war-torn areas of Africa, so to speak, and they would stop fighting. So there's something to be said about the power of not only jazz, but of music to unify us and to bring peace that we all want so badly on this planet.
Yes, I agree. I mean, I use it. I use it just, because if I didn't have this, it would be so easy to lose your mind.
For sure. So let's talk about this brand new project with Tony coming out on May 12th, Hymns. What was it like to create with him, and what does it mean and feel to be able to have this music coming out at this particular time of your life?
Yeah, it's kind of unreal. I knew about Tony and his music when I first moved to Paris. So this was 9 years ago, almost 10 years ago now. And so going from watching him, he was already doing really fantastic things, collaborating with great musicians, American musicians. And so going from that to recording an album with him, it's been, quite a journey for me. And it felt very comfortable. We did just a couple of days, one day of rehearsals we did. So just prior to the studio dates, and everything kind of fell into place. We had the arrangements that I did. I always like to keep things very open. So there's the create. You can create on the spot as we're recording. We can discuss things. I can suggest. He suggests, and that is for me the beauty of being in the studio. That no one is kind of tied down with these arrangements. And it was just the first day we did most of the tunes, and then the second day we're just refining some things, and I felt absolutely comfortable, like I could play anything. And in fact, when I hear what we did, I mean, I don't think my playing has ever sounded so natural. And it's also funny because this past year during the war, I felt that it's been a turning point for my playing, because finally, after so many years, like I've been playing for about 25 years, almost 23, 24 years, I finally understood what I want to sound like. what my sound is supposed to be. Like I'm connected to it. It's part of my personality now.
You know, Miles Davis had a quote about how long it takes for you to find your voice. It seems rather rote that you have your voice in the beginning, but you have to find it. Is that a little bit of what you're kind of referring to?
Yes, kind of. I understand. It's exactly that. I understand how I want to play things. Because usually it's, even if you're talking, if you take just a melody, a standard, and you think, okay, so many people play it so differently, but what do I know what I like, but liking something and playing it with your personality are two very different things.
You know, I remember the early story of Charlie Parker. You know, he had a bad car accident when he was here in Kansas City, and he actually went to a place that is south of Kansas City called the Ozarks, and it's rather rural, and he really built himself up there. So my lead into my next question is this. He went through a lot of personal adversity to find that voice that has changed the world. Do you feel like you've arrived at your voice because of what you've lived through between being in an area like Ukraine that is going through what it's going through and living through a pandemic?
I wouldn't say that it's because of that, but maybe indirectly, let's say that it's because I was doing so much practice. I was just playing by myself. I had all the time in the world to think about. I've always been thinking about my sound. For me, so it's always been about tone, anything I play. And I've gotten into that more and more, and now I practice mostly just solo. Anything I practice, I want to be with myself. And also, yes, both during the pandemic and during the war, there wasn't much happening for me I wasn't here for long in Ukraine, but also then going back to Malta, it kind of takes, when you're moving around, it takes some time to start playing again.
So let me ask.
Yes, definitely have.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. Let's go back to the beginnings of your life. You started playing at 8. You've been at this for a long time. Tell me where you were born and raised and how the seeds of jazz, more specifically, got into you. Maybe early influences and how it gained steam.
Yeah, I started, when I was about 8, I started playing the violin and learning music. And I detested the violin. I couldn't stand it. I didn't like practicing it. I didn't like how it sounds, and I wasn't really interested, and I had quit. And when I was 11, for some reason, I don't know what the reason is, I don't believe I had seen a saxophone before, I told my mom that I want to play the saxophone. And she found a teacher he's one of the most well-known saxophonist jazz musicians on the island. He's around 93 years old now, and he was the one who really taught me how to learn what the music is. So he wouldn't say much. But for example, I'd go to a lesson and he'd tell me, do you know who Dizzy Gillespie is? Do you know who Charlie Parker is? And I tell him no. And he says, okay, take this, and he gives me a CD. Another time he gives me another CD. And it's just that, just even telling me the names of people, it made a huge difference, because then I could just explore things by myself. Of course, it took some time until I really got into it. But I remember my first CD, for example, was Best of Big Bands. So that's, I got right into it. And he would teach me specifically from the first day how to play jazz.
So, Carlo, what was the first live jazz show you ever saw in person that either blew you away and made you think, I need more of this, or I want to be a professional musician because of this?
So, growing up in Malta, there wasn't much of a scene going on. I can't remember the first proper jazz show. It wasn't really the live music that got me into it. it was really the listening to albums. For me, it was kind of Sonny Rollins. I remember Saxophone Colossus was the album that really spoke to me, and I understood that I want to play. I was probably 14 years old. And then, luckily, from when I was 20, the jazz festival really started picking up again. And there, at least we got to see a lot of great names, so that helped. But I was already playing quite a bit by then. So I wouldn't say it's because of the live music. That is really, really quite actually missing in my early development.
What was the stage that you finally got to play on where you felt like, wow, I've always dreamed of this? Or at what point in your career did you feel like, wow, I really feel good and comfortable and this is where I need to be?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure if I'm there yet. It always feels like you're never there. You know, it's one day you think, wow, this is so great, and the next day it's we're back at it. It's really tough. I mean, when I was in Paris, that was when I was really seeing more live music, going to venues. Obviously, I mean, in Malta there aren't even really any venues. There weren't, let's say that, at the time. So in Paris, I got closer to the musicians. I could listen to them in more detail. I could get inspired. I started going to jam sessions, learning from other musicians, and then I got to record my first album in Paris. So that was really a turning point for me, where I understood that something can happen.
You know, with you saying that, the thing that always blows me away is how many people exist on this planet in parts of the world that we wouldn't expect would be into jazz, but it just shows the reach and breadth of this art form that started here in America. And I'm curious, do you ever think about that, the lineage and history of this art form that you've picked up on and dedicated your life to?
I do think about it, but I think it's so young, no, don't you think?
Yeah.
I mean, and it has changed so much. So I don't think I can't think of any other genre that is so young and has gone through so many changes.
You know, it's interesting you say that, because I think for context, I've been over to Europe, and the thing that always struck me, whether I was in Paris or London or Rome, is how young America is. Like, when you get into those cradles of antiquity and you realize how many years they've been around, you're 100% right.
Yes.
I haven't really thought about it in that context, but we are still dealing with the young art form. And I guess that would just add more pizzazz to that notion, is that something that's still this young is permeating so many parts of the world and making people internationally make it their career.
Yeah, yes, but also I do also worry kind of a little bit with if it's changed so much, what's going to happen to it, in another 100 years. I mean, how far are we going to go from what it really was? If it will happen, maybe it will work out. Just that's what I think about, and that's what also I try to. So I kind of try to incorporate that in the direction I want to take with my music.
That's fascinating. Yeah. And I think that's the one thing that I know as a fan of this music, not being a player of it, is that I'm always amazed at how much it has changed. I mean, in the early goes, when bebop came around, they used to call the old players old figs, and there was concern. But, that's been kind of a hallmark of this art form, is the way that it's changed and evolved so much.
Yes, exactly.
Every day you wake up, you get the chance to create music. You get to be a part of being a group of professional musicians, which includes recording and playing live and educating. But for you, what is it that you look forward to the most? What is it that gets you out of bed, motivates you, and propels you to be the musician that you are?
I think over the years, whenever I thought about being a musician, it was mostly about writing and recording, even more than playing live, possibly. There's something about collaborating with different people and recording your own music. Not that playing live is not enjoyable, because of course it's very exciting being in front of an audience, especially large audiences. But just there's something about getting something down and being able to show it to people, which doesn't really happen in live. Live is just it's fleeting.
So let me ask you this: why do you love jazz?
Because it gives more freedom. It blurs the lines a little bit. It's a bit like painting. It's the difference between drawing something and creating something with the same medium.
So let me ask you this: if you could get into a time machine, and you could go back in time and see any jazz musician anywhere, where are you going to go? Who are you going to see?
Oh, definitely post-bop, hard bop, like Jazz Messengers, stuff like that. You know, the quintet with the Jazz Messengers with Wayne Shorter, kind of Bolladderly quintet.
Well, you know, that's another Kansas City connection. Bobby Watson is still here in Kansas City, and really kind of he was the actual teacher for Herman Mehari, and he has brought to life a whole crop of Kansas City cats that have gone on to not only excel here but around the world. So it's interesting. He was a part of that alumni, so to speak.
Yes, and also that school of the Jazz Messengers kind of playing. It is exactly kind of right in the middle, where things are correct, but they're flexible.
You know, you saying Art Blakey, I got a quick story Bobby told me one time that I always think about. It was almost like a Norman Rockwell painting got painted in my head. He always told me about Art. He was really young at heart, and he loved being around the younger people. And at one point he was explaining how in Germany, late at night after a gig, they would go to the clubs, and he kind of walked through the mist like this mythical creature, and he would get out on the dance floor and dance and get into it and really feel that youthful energy, which just is a testament to his power, because he channeled such a youthful glow about the way he played.
Yes. And it was all about intensity, for him, and you can tell.
100%. Yeah, that's it. That was the word I was looking for, the intensity of the way he put it out there. And those cats around him responded. That's why they were so iconic.
Yes, exactly. And even for me, when I think about sound, when I think about tone, just one note, for me it's about how do I make it intense. And intense is a very, very complex thing in my opinion. The way I think about it, because it's not about how big it is. It's not about how loud it is, but it's just intense. So how are you intense in a ballad? It's the same, in classical music. How is Beethoven? For example, Beethoven's works. How are they so intense even when they're soft and when they're calm? And that is what I think. That is the direction I aspire to.
So, Carlo, everyone out there has a perception of you, an idea of who they think you are. Your family, your friends, your fans, colleagues, but ultimately you live your life. You're in control of what you do. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
That's fine. Just of my partner, I hope I know the questions he's going to ask me, because I don't know that much about myself. So that's a really tough question. I'm not really sure. I'm not really sure who I am. I just think I just always focus on obtaining more freedom in my life. I would do anything to be able to be free of any kind of constraint.
That makes total sense. That is probably one of the most profound answers I've had to this question, especially under the guise and context of where you're at and what you're doing and what we're living through. That's very profound.
Yes, and also it's one of the reasons I didn't want to leave.
Yeah.
Just to make a point, because it is very much part of the way I feel about myself.
Well, I think in the history of humans, one of the things that's always consistently saved us is the arts, and I think you being a practitioner of the arts is going to just bring so much joy not only to the people of Ukraine, but people all over the world. So I appreciate you taking time to talk about hymns, and I want to know, before we get out of this proverbial digital door here, where is the best place for people to pick up the album, learn more about you, anything going on with your world and the album?
Yeah, so the album, the easiest way to get it is on Bandcamp, so it will be the first single is already available there, and it will be available in full on Friday, 12th May. It can be downloaded, and for any information, people can find out more about me on my website, so just search Carlo Muscat, it's www.carlomuscat.com, and also Instagram and on Facebook. Just search my name and I'm there. For physical albums, at the moment we're not even sure if we're going to make any, so maybe in the future, but for now it's all digital and it will be on all platforms, of course.
Carlo, thank you very much for taking time out to talk with Neon Jazz here in Kansas City. And just so you know I've said it, and I hope you all realize it there in Ukraine. The world is 100% behind you, sending all of our positivity your way. So,
and Ukrainians appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you for the music. Thank you for your time. Best of luck.
Thank you so much, Joe.
Stay safe and stay strong.
I will. Thank you very much.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest players and minds in Paris, Ukraine, Kansas City, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. Thanks to Carlo for his time, honesty, and cool. If you want to hear more interviews, you can find Neon Jazz interviews on either Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Subscribe to us on YouTube for everything Neon Jazz. Go to the neonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Neon Jazz.